Okay, thank you. Should I start over? Or we're good? Yeah. Thank you. First, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Filewave real quick, but I don't want to make this a marketing thing, so I'm just going to kind of tell you about us. We have been around for over 30 years in this client management field, starting in the original days of classic Mac OS. Okay? And through the years, we've been adding more and more, keeping up with Apple, as well as adding additional platforms as well. We like to think of ourselves as a Swiss Army knife type of tool. There's a lot of things that we can do, and you can use the tools that you need and pick the right tools for the right tasks. Feel it makes you much more efficient when you're trying to manage your machines. One of our strong points, I feel, is like we have a lot of cross-platform management, and we try to keep our interface consistent across all of those platforms. So when we talk about things like file deployment today, even MDM, those features exist on multiple platforms as appropriate. We really can specialize in getting content onto your machines. That can be files, those can be apps for apps, those can be profiles, all sorts of pretty much anything that you have in a file format we can get onto your machines. Another piece that makes us unique is we have the self-healing technology. So Filewave can literally deploy software to a machine very specifically, make sure that it stays the way that you deployed it, and when if a user changes it or something goes awry, it will return it back to that original state. And as mentioned here, we can do a lot of dragging and dropping. This is kind of the Swiss Army knife Filewave branded thing, but you kind of see all the things that we do. And it's really, the big focus is usually on the patch management and the MDM, content management. We can take the machines from start to finish, out of the box, particularly with DEP and things like autopilot. And one piece that we also have is inventory, which is throughout the product, and will be one of the sneak peek, one of the 15 items that I talked about today.
Well, maybe the MDM Plus that it said on the other slide was because we're not just MDM, but we also have an agent present on the machine. So Mac and Windows, there's sort of this agent on top of the MDM functionality in the case of Apple or Microsoft.
Yeah, so we can do just more than just what you might be able to do with MDM, and that's a big value add. So, as I mentioned, we're very, I feel very powerful and versatile tool. But like I mentioned, there's a lot of things that people don't know about. So, in honor of our latest release of Filewave 15, which has been a couple weeks now, I think. We wanted to select 15 of our favorite features you might not be aware of, but we feel could be very useful for you. I was originally going to do a David Letterman's top 10 thing. Wasn't sure if people would understand the references. And being that it's Filewave 15, marketing convinced me, let's come up with 15 things, and I was able to find those. So what I'm going to kind of go through is talk of them quickly. I got some screenshots, and then at the end, as time allows, we can demonstrate some of them. And if you have questions, I have this little catch box that I can throw at you. I'll warn you now, it may be. I'm not sure I'll be able to get the back row, but you might have to run for it. So, one of the features that we have is what we call file level deployment and self-healing. I touched upon that in the beginning, but essentially we can deploy files at a very granular level to machines, and we can do that even at the permission level. So we can say I want this file on this machine with these permissions, and that's how I want it to go out, and that's how I want it to stay. You can also just say, I just want to put those out there, and I don't care what happens afterwards. So we have those options. The way we push things down is the clients connect in, and they will pull down the files that they need to the machine, and they go to a temporary area. When everything has arrived, everything gets moved over to the correct locations. And you can set timers on these things. So you could be pushing out software for a week or two just in the background, and say, okay, on August 1st, I want this particular group of files to activate and become visible to the user. This is very handy when you're trying to coordinate a large rollout, that you want to make sure everyone kind of gets it at the same time, and everyone's like, what version do I have and whatever. The software upgrades, we essentially, it's very handy if you have upgrades, incremental upgrades. So we know there's different packages of software out there that update fairly often, and you may want to handle those. So what we can do is, if you're looking at something that's already installed on your machine and you want to get that next update, can only pull down, if you want, we can only pull down those files that make the change. So you can get, for instance, something like Office, put into Filewave, and then the monthly update comes out or whatever. You can actually have a differential and pull down those changes. This makes it very efficient for very large deployments as well. You may have situations where there's just and for this is where ginormous packages from certain vendors that are just very large. rather than trying to pull down that whole big thing, we can actually capture a snapshot of that install, and that can again trickle down to the machines. And we can scale these up very well with one of my further items on the list. Self-healing, again, we automatically once a day check to see if the files that we delivered are still exactly how we deployed them. If they are set for self-healing, they will be repaired at that point, and they will only pull down the files they need. As I mentioned, the incremental upgrades, we only grab the files that we need changed. And I kind of touched on it too, is it's much more efficient when you have many small files rather than trying to pull them down. We also have a tool called File Set Magic, which essentially can snapshot the machine before an install and after an install. And what it will do is actually give you something like this here, where you see a screenshot I've set up here. This is BB Edit, and this is an example of a file set that we've captured all the contents of it. It's as easy as dragging and dropping it into the admin window. And what you get is BB Edit comes in, and you can see there's a path there for the applications folder, and those are all the components. Each one of those can be individually controlled. And when we deploy, we can say that it's left behind, which means we push it out and we don't care what happens. We have another one that is self-healing, which says, please replace it if everything has changed. And then the third option is install if missing, which is basically, I gotta remember that one, install with missing, which means if the file is just missing, replace it. You can also see, and this is an example of POSIX permissions, but you can actually set the different permissions here for the files themselves. And we support ACLs as well on the Windows side for those that are using that. Number 14, we have dashboards. So I get calls all the time from the customers, oh, my Apple certificate ran out and I didn't know, or they didn't get the email or whatever. Or even the certificates we use for the server, their MDM certificate has expired. And we usually get a call, like, none of my iPads are receiving anything anymore, or my Macs are not getting the apps from the App Store. So we have a dashboard, which I'm going to give you 2 pictures of that. The dashboard's great, but it also has a component for notifying the user. So we have a whole bunch of conditions the dashboard can warn you on. Low disk space, a booster is stopped responding, your hard drive's getting full, and there's a whole number of those things. But I have found a lot of people have never set those up, and you can probably confirm that. Yeah. And that's a very important thing to put on, easy to miss when you're setting up Filewave. But it will save you a lot of time when you get a warning about a month before, or your
30 days.
30 days, and it will keep. I believe it keeps reminding you on that. But not only do we have one dashboard, we actually have 2 dashboards. So we've been working on for a while. We have we have one Filewave product, but we have 2 components to it. There's Filewave Central, which is using the classic admin that we've had. Native admin runs on Mac or runs on Windows, and that's got all the features in it. And we also have what we call Filewave Anywhere, which is a web interface into the most common and probably most, the tools will make you most efficient over time. And
well, and like if you have a technician in the field, it's all the things they're going to use. They're not going to be like uploading a Windows image or building some complicated file set out in the field, but they might go in the web admin and look up a machine, look up information, change a custom field. Custom fields are fields you can store anything in,
that's
like depart. Oh,
yeah,
I got ahead. But the
we're doing that all day today.
Anywhere has this Grafana dashboard, which is really nice, open source project, and you can use Grafana for other things too. We believe the direction is that everything would head to Grafana as the dashboard, so the Filewave Central application would probably at some point switch to showing Grafana, because essentially in Grafana you basically have a replica of the current dashboard, and you can do much, much more.
But the key thing to take away here is that set up your notifications if you are using Filewave, because that will save you a lot of time, because the number of calls we do get in support can probably attest to this, is did you set it up? Oh, I didn't have that set up. You have to basically set up your SMTP server, make sure that's working, and then you'll forget about it, but it's nice because you get those warnings every so often. So yeah, basically I want to mention we have 2 dashboards. I'm going to show you a quick picture of them. The notifications are key. It'll also let you know if there's any issues with critical things, and you can actually turn off some if I really don't care if to hear about the boosters every whatever.
But APNS certificates, for DEP tokens, for SSL certs, you definitely want to know, because I've had customers where those things expired and they weren't sure why things weren't running, but then you'll see it when you look at the dashboard, and it's a quick fix.
Yeah, and it even keeps track of if you're tied into LDAP, for instance. If your LDAP
synced, the last time it synced.
Yeah. So, but to show you as best here, and I do apologize, it's a little small. On the left-hand side is our classic dashboard, and what they basically say is the Android EMM running, our boosters running. Yes, that's Apple Classroom in there too. That's telling you that my certs are okay for Apple Classroom. DEP is green. Now, when this snapshot was taken on Josh's server, his email settings are not.
That was on purpose. I never fixed it.
Username and password not accepted, but that will let you know that, and hence he's not getting alerts, but he would if that was corrected. And LDAP and APN, SSL certificates, so they're all showing. On the right-hand side, there's some information about like your different VPP tokens and when they're aging out. And there's more to that screen on the bottom. I can try to show you that to you. But essentially, there are things like server stats, and there's also a button to like hit to reach support or capture logs as well, I think, right? That takes care of it.
I don't remember the button for logs, but you'll see disk-based CPU usage. You'll see the types of devices enrolled. You'll see the RAM in use. There is a bunch of stuff when you scroll further down.
Yeah. Now, on the right side is the new Grafana dashboard, and this is just like one of many panels that it does. This one, he's showing some basic server stats.
That was for the NATs, the reverse proxy that we do. But there's similar dashboards for a lot of the components of Filewave.
You can see loads of things. You can also see how are my boosters performing. And what I also like too, and this is all built in, when you're looking at an association or a deployment, it will actually show you like how far they've come along and everything too. So.
Yeah, in Filewave Central, when you're editing a file set, which is like an application or thing that you're pushing out, you can choose to expose it to the dashboard. There's a checkbox on the association that would make it available in Grafana, and you can make nice. We did that at a school system. They re-image all their stuff every summer, which a lot of you do, and we made little progress bars that show the progress of the re-imaging across all the schools. There's like 30 little progress bars.
Yeah. And Josh's group does most of that professional service group, so he is probably the expert on the Grafana dashboards.
Well, and we did a session on getting into Grafana. We have a Discord server, and we do training sessions there for free, and we post them on YouTube. So like if you go to youtube.com/Filewave, you'll see that Grafana session, and you can watch it. And even if you don't use Filewave, you might want to look at that to see what Grafana does, because you might want to use Grafana for other things.
It's kind of a cool system. But that's where we're kind of heading. But my key point I want to let you know is like use the dashboard, but in particular, use the notifications, because you'll save yourself a lot of headache later. Another thing, this is another feature that a lot of people don't know about, and you may not even run into if you're going to have a smaller setup and you are the only one administrating the server. Well, you probably don't need a lot to do with permissions, but one of the things is you can have different levels of admins in Filewave. Those can be pulled, you can have different accounts, so those can be pulled both from directories, from IDPs such as Okta and Azure and OpenLDAP and a whole slew of them. And those you log into Filewave, the admin with, and you can have permissions both for what the user can do. So am I allowed to update the model? Am I allowed to create a file set? You can also set those up, and you also can decide whether they can access certain VPP tokens and things like that. But you can also have different objects at different levels. So let's say you have like your Mac and your Windows, your large department, you have different administrators running those. You could, for instance, not let the Mac administrator see any of the Windows objects and vice versa. So you can, within Filewave, decide what objects people are able to work on or what parts of your organization. And those carry into the web interface as well with the Filewave Anywhere. So,
and thus the API as well. So if you integrate with something else, you would, for instance, make a separate login for things you're going to tie in via API. Like if you were going to have Incident IQ, syncing custom fields in, you'd probably make a user called like Incident IQ API, give it whatever permissions, in theory the least permissions needed, and then the application would be using that user's API token.
Yeah, and the other thing too is like, you know, an admin, if you've got several of you in there, you can see who else is on and what parts they're in. So you're not accidentally both trying to edit the same payload at the same time, because that's not a good idea. And right for now, when you do the update and commit the changes, it's across the board, but I know we're looking at ways to do that a little differently. This is just a screenshot of where the permissions are. We've added many over the years. Excuse me. And what you see on the left-hand side is a list of the different users. Some are local accounts on my Filewave server. Others are from the directory. Others are from Azure and things like that. Sorry. And you can see on the left side, we have things like permissions that are listed. Those are what are the things they're able to, can you real quick?
Yeah,
sorry.
So you can set permissions at different levels on different objects. So on the right, you're basically saying for these users, they can do these things against the thing that he did the permissions option on. So whether it be like you have a group called Windows and you right click on that, you pick set permissions, then you would see that and you'd be able to say what they can do. So they could either not see it, or they could see it, they could change it, or they could delete things in it. So the permission system's it's simple enough, and there's a little propagate to children checkbox that you may or may not be able to see there, but that also then simplifies the things that are downstream of that, maybe Windows folder of stuff.
Yeah, so if this is a need in your environment, you can certainly, obviously we all trust each other as administrators within our districts, but sometimes you may have people in different roles and you don't need them to, you may let them assign file sets to places, but not necessarily create them or something, so. This is a good way to do that. It's something that like a lot of people don't know about, but it is something that could be useful. Now I know this is Mac admin, so I'll do this slide really quick. But yes, we actually added Windows MDM a couple years ago. I believe the requirements are, they renamed it Entra.
So if you haven't seen, Azure AD is not Azure AD anymore. Now it's Microsoft Entra ID. So you'll see us rename that in the knowledge base. I already renamed it because I just wanted to get ahead of it. But you need the Premium 1 or Premium 2 of what was Azure AD. You don't need Intune licenses. It's very confusing in the Microsoft documentation because it kind of makes it seem like they want you to think you need Intune licenses, but that wouldn't make any sense because why would you buy Intune licenses to use another MDM? So I can assure you it works with P1 and P2. We've done it in our labs, and I've done it with customers. It takes about 15 minutes to set the whole thing up. If you're actively using it and enrolling your machines, it's like 15 minutes to set this up. And then you get the benefit of these CSPs, which are like Apple profiles, but on the Windows side, and they do nice things like you can push out a CSP that says upgrade all the Windows 10 machines to Windows 11. Any machine you target with the CSP would try and do that.
But because we're MDM Plus, like we're talking about here, we still have our agent, so you can take the machine out of the box, correct me if I'm wrong. You can basically tie into that. Filewave gets enrolled, the client gets enrolled into your Filewave server, and at that point we'll pull down the agent.
Yes.
And then now you have the Filewave agent, so everything I'm showing you, the Filewave agent, which we've had for a long time now, all that applies.
Yeah,
so it's a nice way to get it deployed out without having to touch it.
When it goes through the out-of-box experience and it asks for your email and password for your organization, which Windows does now, when it authenticates against your Azure AD or Entra ID, that will then say to it, hey, there's this MDM app defined, and I should push that to you. It tells your machine about Filewave. Filewave talks to Entra, and then the MSI installer runs, and now we have a full agent on the machine, and all they had to do really was log into the machine with their credentials at the start. So you kind of get a zero-touch kind of experience. If once they log in and the Filewave agent comes down, then if everything's file sets, then you can get all their applications on the machine, any CSPs to configure it, and you can have kind of the Apple-y experience that you're used to with the ADE process.
Yeah, and to mention too, we do have support for Autopilot, correct?
This all kind of ties together.
Yeah,
Autopilot's just a piece of it where you can configure things like you don't want to see Cortana show up. Think of that like in depth profiles,
So
how you
like
have the checkbox.
Right? Okay.
It's very close. I'd say the place where it's not entirely there is in Apple's worlds, they marry it right from when you're booting up, like right from the kind of from the firmware level coming in, right? You can't throw on macOS and not have it activate against Apple. I mean, unless you know some trickery to do it, but normally you can't. But in the Windows case, you have to authenticate with your organization details, and then it kind of is married from then.
Yeah, and then the last point I just really want to mention too is there are tools that are out there like Xcred's 2. I think they just revised, so I put the X in there. But we can support logins using those Azure or Google Cloud, Okta, or any OIDC.
That's more for the Mac side, right? So
that's for the Mac side, yes. So kind of related. I was not sure where to put
we intermixed it.
We intermixed it. Well, that came at the same time because just want to show you. This is just a sample screenshot of what a Windows profile looks like. It's and this is in the Filewave Anywhere in the web interface, but you can kind of see what we kind of probably look a little configurator, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, because the same people were designing the same. It looks the same as when you added an Apple profile, and it really should be that way because then you don't have to learn a different mechanism to configure it.
But you can see a lot of them are dimmed, but they got things like enterprise cloud print display, restrictions, Defender antivirus connectivity. There's a whole slew of them there. And when you look at the slides, you'll be able to read it a little sharper. So that's just something that I've had conversations, because I work in the customer experience department as an engineer. And a lot of our current customers, or even new customers, are not aware that you can, that we actually have the Windows MDM component. So we kind of wanted to mention that as another power tool, because most environments have a little of everything in them. Custom fields. I'll talk about them briefly. Like Josh has been experiencing longer, actually, because they've been around a bit. But
as a concept?
As a concept, yeah. So custom fields are very powerful tools here. So we have inventory throughout the product, and every one of the platforms that we cover has inventory. Now, right off the bat, anything that is a inventory field, we can use in our scripts. Because Filewave pushes things out at a file level, we can write a script and use the variable for the inventory field in a script, so that you can get very creative with what you can do. You can take this to even a higher level, because custom fields are fields that we define, that you can define as end users. And they can be used, again, in any script or any profile. That would be an Apple profile or one of the Windows profiles. You could have a profile with the name of the person who's registered the device, and you have that field in inventory. And this also feels, because we have inventory everywhere, we also have the concept of a smart group. And what a smart group basically is saying, here's a folder I'm going to have a bunch of clients in, and I'd like them to meet the following criteria. It could be IP address, it could be, again, any field in inventory. And what happens is any of the clients in our system that match those criteria will show up in that list. So you can say, show me all the Mac, show me anything that's Mac OS, and then you'll have a list of all the Mac OS devices. You'll get what we call clones, and clones are basically another name for shortcuts for, what's the other?
Well, we made the clone concepts because think about like Active Directory. Active Directory, a computer can only really exist in one part of the tree, right? You don't have it exist. You use groups when you want to assign things to multiple things, multiple devices. So to get around that in our UI, we have this concept of clones. So you can have the same sort of structure that you think about in AD, but the device can live in multiple places. But we show a clear original, and then all the rest are copies. And you can delete any of the clones, you can move the original. It just is a way to assign multiple things in multiple ways to the same device.
Yeah, and removing an original does remove the clones.
Yeah. And when you delete the one original, you get rid of all the clones, so it's easy to clean up.
So with custom fields, you can start filling in these values for different things, and then make your smart groups like, these are all the Macs at the middle school, these are all the Macs in the printing office.
We use elementary school, middle school, high school, teacher versus student for corporations, finance department versus IT. I had a project in Japan. They have a problem with people working too much, like way too much, where it's to the point of unhealthiness. So there's actually some laws where companies have to track when employees are working and discourage them from overworking. And I made something that would, this is a Windows side thing. I turned on auditing of log on and log off in Windows. It can record things to the local event log. And then I made a custom field that would pull that log in. And so basically at any given time, they could look at the log entries and they can export it out using the API. And then they can prove to the country that they are honoring that rule. So anything you can imagine. We had another school system that, you talk about blocker scripts later or no?
Not specifically.
So there's a kind of script called a blocker script that runs every 5 minutes. You can do anything with it. Almost nobody uses it, but because you have to know it's there.
This would have been number 16 probably.
So it runs every 5 minutes and can do anything. Mac or Windows, it can do anything. And we had a school system where they wanted the kids to be administrators, but only during school hours. When they went home, they were supposed to not be administrators. It was supposed to be to make flexibility during the school day if something had to get fixed. But then they go home, we don't want them to mess around at all. So this was in Singapore. This is another international project. But this script that ran every 5 minutes would look at the current time, and it would actually look at some custom fields where we defined school hours and school days. So based on the time of day, it would actually either make the login an administrator or not an administrator. And it was policing itself every 5 minutes. And it was really interesting. Anything you can imagine, you can accomplish if it's scriptable. You can't script on iPads, but that's just an iPad thing. I think the future will have things where we can do the equivalent, but Mac and Windows, you can script anything.
Now, that being said, I'm going to talk about the custom fields, though. You can have custom fields on iOS.
You can have custom
You can import
fields.
them in, so there are ways of doing that. But a custom field can be driven by several things. His example is with some scripts, right? That's a really cool way to do it with Mac and Windows for sure. You can also have these import from a CSV file.
Or LDAP integration.
Or LDAP integration too, so.
Because if we see the current user matches somebody in your LDAP, then we'll say that that's the user of the device. Like, it'll give you some more info. And you can assign things. Also with Okta, Azure, and Google IDP integration, there's also ways to tie in there with assignment. And the custom fields that are not scripts, like where you're storing text, a date or...
Integer or Boolean.
Yeah.
I wrote all four, so I remember.
So with those, you can use this on iPads because you're setting those. You're choosing to set it in the admin. You're choosing to set it through the API. So plenty of organizations make custom fields for department or school or whatever. And then you can use that in reporting and for assigning content.
We had one district, I'll mention this briefly, is one district that they didn't want to give everyone the ability to update the model and do the higher level stuff, so they actually had custom fields that were Booleans, which they made true or false, and it was whether they belonged to the I get Microsoft Office smart group or I get whatever smart group. And because that's editable by a lower level administrator, that person could change the value there. It falls into the smart group. This is all without updating things. And then within 5, 10, whatever the timing is, it would fall into that group and then start getting the software that it's supposed to use.
Or there's 2 organizations I know of that have a portal outside of Filewave that uses the API, and you can say, this particular serial number machine or device should get this software, and they have a menu of choices. And then that, through API, changes a custom field in Filewave, which makes the device move into the group, and you don't have to do these things called model updates. But it would instantly pop into the group and then get the software. So you can do an outside menu system or some kind of integration that pushes.
And I would say this is fair to say this is a feature that some people are not touching at all, but it can be very.
The ones that are
powerful.
Build out a lot of stuff to tie in.
We actually, some of the ones we've mentioned, I know like that one with the district that was switching the different packages, they showed us how they did it. We're like, oh, didn't think of that. So it really gives you a lot of that. Now, just these, if you're running these scripts, they run on a daily basis at a minimum. So they will update. So like if you're doing like a battery health type thing, these fields can be updated.
They run on a verify. So verifies happen every 24 hours at boot time, and I believe at login too. So generally
or
24.
On demand, so yeah.
I believe generally every 24 hours. And you can ask for them to happen on demand. And I know I mentioned we have a Discord server. On there, people can share scripts and develop things together because people have built some interesting things and they're happy to share.
The only other thing I really want to mention here is like on the client view, you can add, this is kind of related, you can add any field you'd like to the client view when you're looking at the listing. Because originally we had like the 8 columns, and then we added the ability to add any single value field, so you can't have like an array. But you can say, I want to show you this battery life. I'd like to show all things with a battery life of 50% or something like that. And you can. It's a quick way to sort through. It's not really inventory per se, but like in that view, people were giving us reasons why I would just like to sort on some other fields other than the ones that you created. And they always could add a couple, but there were only like 13 they could use. So we basically went through and did that.
Yeah, and that's the, when you're in the admin, either anywhere or central, anywhere being the web and central being the application, there's sort of this client's view, and you can pick what columns that you want there, and they'll always be there. They'll maintain their sort, and it's like your top things that you always want to look at.
Now, from examples, we can do things like battery health, anything that you can script literally. So coming down to, or I have this one here for Josh. You can also use the API to get those values into the custom.
Yeah, even in the script, so that script about in school and out of school, it would actually update through API some of the custom fields as it ran.
Now this is example. This is just a Mac picture of it, but these are how you would set up custom fields, and these were some standard ones that we had created. But you can see essentially, you have the fields, you have that internal name that's what you use in your scripts.
You can reference it through API.
Yep. And you have because they only run on Mac, and you can do things like filling them from a client script by hand. If you're doing a client script, you can see on the right-hand side, it says script type. This is an example of Mac OS. You can run, I think there's 3 or 4 shells on the Mac side, and on the Windows side, you can do PowerShell.
I think on one of your slides you have the little grid. I don't remember what slide, but so we don't have to jump.
We're going to see if it's there.
But there is Python, for instance,
Yeah.
but there's a caveat that on Windows and Mac, you have to make sure Python's there because Apple does not bundle Python anymore, but you can install it. We have an article about it. Same thing on Windows. If it's installed, we'll do it PowerShell on Windows. We can do shell scripting on the Mac without adding anything else.
And you can edit them in Filewave. So it's like, let's say you're pushing, and we are covering scripting later, so I think it's in there. When I show the scripting that you attach to a file set, which is my luck going to be the next one, what you can do is you can edit the scripts within Filewave because we look at everything as a file. You modify that file, you make a change to it of what you want that script to do, you can edit it in Filewave. And it's really pretty on the web interface. But what you can do is you can edit it there, and when you commit those changes, Filewave is just sending out that one little file and then telling it to run upon deployment. So that's one of the advantages of deploying things at that granular of a level. We also made it so that you could have like the same field you're defining would have the 2 different scripts for each platform's there. So deployments, okay, so deployments is basically a term that we would use in the web interface.
You have to back up a step because there's a thing called associations. So, right, because I mean, associations is how you apply the stuff to the device. Yeah. It's like when it becomes available, when it gets deleted, who it gets assigned to. And then associations had a couple of shortcomings, but one of them was that you couldn't easily say something shouldn't go to Bob's machine. It should go to everything in this group, but not to Bob's. And deployments
Although people found ways to do that. Even
there were cheats to do it, but this was designed to overhaul what associations were. It's new, and originally it was only editable in anywhere, the web admin, which is not very useful if you find yourself always in the native admin. So now in version 15, you can edit in either admin. You can create, modify, destroy in either one. And so you can take the benefit of this improvement over associations. But they both exist. So you can still make associations and you can still make deployments because we don't like to tear out the old until we're sure the new is good. So we have a tool that's in Anywhere to convert associations to deployments. And one day we're going to say associations have to start going away. But we're not at that. We're not at that point. We're mostly at the point where you should see, do deployments work for me? Am I happy with them? Are there bugs that I've discovered? Because it's completely reworked. And yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. I mean, basically, like I was kind of in the second line, I was like, well, deployments are basically a new improved version of associations. I didn't define the associations.
Yeah, I guess we should have moved that to the front.
But there are some nice things about them, too. You can actually group things a little better. And as he mentioned, the tool is very good because the conversion tool kind of helps you straighten out associations because if you went crazy doing associations, you could confuse yourself pretty quickly. The deployments makes it a little bit neater. But the big thing why people were like waiting to go to the web interface, at least in the beginning, I think a little bit, was because deployments were in one and the other
associations
one.
were
And
in
like,
the
how
other.
do I keep them straight? So this lets you now hop between.
You can do either in either place, and there's a wizard for the migration, makes it very easy. And then the other thing with deployments that was an improvement is an association is like a stuff or a group with a group of stuff that's associated to a device or a group of devices. But that stuff in deployments you can kind of consolidate. You can take maybe 10 associations and turn it into one deployment. So maybe your deployment's no longer about the stuff, because that was usually what it was about. It's about maybe who's getting it. Like if you say, this deployment's called the standard application loadout for elementary school, and it has all the stuff in it for that, and then it's one deployment. It's a lot clearer and cleaner, so it should make less chaos.
Now, if you look to, as just an example very quickly here, I kind of showed 3 different views of deployments. These are looking at them from the central. They are prettier in the other one, but I wanted to show you that they were here. Yeah. And the first one shows all the targets. That's like it's always been. This is my devices that I want to hit. These are all iOS devices. The second one is the file sets, and you can see here, I actually lumped 3 iOS App Store apps together, okay? And I gave you the third screen here because this is just like if you wanted it. These are the similar options that you had in associations. Am I doing it directly, or are we doing it through the kiosk, which that is another
We do talk
number
about
later?
the kiosk.
Or do I do it in the background? If I'm doing it in the background, I can decide when do they go out, when do they activate, when do they start downloading, when do they actually show up. If I want to deactivate, when do I deactivate it, when does it delete it? So these are all the same options, and then it's some user assignments. So this is just it is a rebranding, but the nice thing is you see in the bottom part there, I have a bunch of iPads, but I listed one on the bottom that says Filewave iPad. That's one that I'm excluding. So like everyone gets this except for that one. It's a much easier way to exclude a particular.
And you can exclude devices and exclude groups. You can include devices and you can include groups, and you can do all 4 of those things together in one deployment. So it can be, I want to do finance plus Bob's machine, but I don't want to do Sally's machine
Or the
and
CEO,
some group that's within there, like executive staff.
Like I personally was like not hopping into both or doing things separately. Now that we have this in Filewave 15,
You can do it in
I will
both.
be hopping into the web interface a lot more and I'm probably going to convert all my associations just so I run through that too. Because deployments really are the way of the future, but again, associations are not going anywhere in the
Yeah.
immediate.
Well, and it might be a good time to just mention if anyone had heard or thought that Central was going away, the application that we used to call Filewave Admin, it's not going away. It's just called Filewave Central. It just has a name because it's your central place to do stuff. It will continue to live on. It will continue to be the tool that does, I guess, all the things. And then Filewave Anywhere will be the tool that does the things that make sense in a web interface, which will be not all the things maybe, but a lot of the things. And, so you're going to find technicians are always in Anywhere, probably. Somebody running Filewave is probably in Central. But we're continuing to maintain both. There was a little confusion for a little bit, but that's all straightened out. And those plus the APIs, I guess all 3 things are going to continue to get better.
I've been positioning it as like, Filewave, it's a companion tool to Filewave, and you choose what you want to use for what you need. And it's just another way to manage your Filewave clients. People have preferences on, there's a lot of drag and drop things that just are nicer that they're easier to do sometimes in the native admin. Very important thing is like there's times you don't want to install the admin client on your machine because you just want to check did that person get the software, or you need to just verify their machine, or you want to tell it to try to reinstall the file set. You can hop on a web browser. My understanding is it's like perfectly matched to fit an iPad screen.
It does work on an iPad.
So you can do it quickly if you need to. It just makes it a lot easier. But again, good for day-to-day stuff. Like we're trying to make it so the daily drivers of what someone might need to do, would be able to do a lot of what they needed to do without really having a lot of.
Or like if you're out at some, let's use a school again. You're out at a school. You don't have your laptop with you. You're doing physical work there, and you want to log in to check something. Well, you can hop on any computer, log into the web admin or Filewave Anywhere, and be able to check things without. A lot of people will RDP into their own machine, but if you don't have that as an option, the web admin is always there.
Yeah, so the web admin is nice and slick. It feels modern. There are a couple things that I really think it excels at. It does a really good job with importing of CSV files for various things you might need to do. And hopefully some of that functionality we'll see back in Central, but I find it easy to do there. The big thing behind Filewave Anywhere is it really has increased the number of APIs that we have available. I want to do at the end of the deck here, I just want to kind of do a demo maybe of the Anywhere so you can see it. But anyone who has a file server now, or if you're doing an eval with us, this is just turned on automatically. It's the name of your server, basically, HTTPS, // name of your server, and that will bring up your
Anywhere.
Anywhere, yeah.
And yeah,
I'm keeping
because
up with the names here.
Anywhere's all API driven, so anything that Anywhere can do, there is for sure an API to do it, because it does everything via APIs.
And I'm just teasing it real quick, but you can see it got similarity to the different options, devices. Payloads are basically file sets.
And we think, in speaking with Tony, who's the VP of product, I think that they're going back to file sets in both places because it was confusing and they weren't sure which one was a better name, but the original file set name everybody knows. And so
it's the same thing. So
I think you'll see that change back.
And then you got our imaging components, which we now can manage imaging from here for those using a software updates. Deployments, associations is the tool that you use to migrate them. And then the sources, those have equivalents in the main, the main central admin. And again, I hope to just be able to demo this as time allows at the end. We can show you that more. Scripts, we can just show any file set. There is an option, and it's both in the classic and it's in the pictures here. You can attach 7 different types of timing for scripts.
If you've ever edited an Apple package, the names of the scripts will feel familiar because we have like a requirements, a pre-install, a post-install, a post-uninstall.
I'm just going to skip to the picture because it's...
Oh, yeah.
So what we have here, and we did talk about this. These are the same scripts we support for the custom fields. I put the slides here is talking about the scripts on file sets, but it applies to both. And what you basically have here is requirement scripts, which run before anything is allowed to happen. You have the pre-flights, which run
when it's running, yeah. And then activation is like when it's running, and then there's post-flight. So you can order things, and you can have more than one. The UI doesn't really necessarily show you that obviously, but you can actually pick the section and create another script and have 2 activation scripts. They'll run in the order they're in. The uninstall scripts are interesting because imagine I make a file set that pushes out Chrome, and I do it by pushing out the Chrome app on a Mac. I can have an uninstall script that removes Chrome and perhaps removes preferences. Perhaps it goes through all the users and removes preferences. So you can do cleanup. We try, in the file sets we build, like the TeamViewer file set that's in our knowledge base, we try to always have an uninstall script. If we have the time to build it, we try to always include an uninstall.
Yeah, and part of the thing that's nice, and I know that definitely works with the Windows things that go through the MSIs. If there's an uninstall option on it, it'll run.
There's a checkbox
But
if it's an MSI to
if you send something out as self-healing, and this is where we can control files, if you push something out and it's self-healing and it has that installer in it, when you unassociate it or you break that connection and it pulls it back, that uninstall script will run on Windows if there is one as part of the MSI. So
yeah,
it's neat stuff. And I just want to show you, here's a screenshot on the right-hand side. That's the script editor. I'm showing you that one because that's much prettier because it's color-coded.
Oh, that's in Anywhere.
That's in Anywhere, but we have a very similar script editor.
But I could see that coming into Central. So one thing was, as we built out Anywhere, over the past 2 years, we spent a lot of effort on Anywhere, almost to the exclusion of Central. So now things should flow back into Central. It's kind of this tick-tock thing.
Yeah. And then briefly, he mentioned the different platforms. For Mac OS, we do the Perl, the Python, and the Shell, assuming those are on the operating system you're working on at the time. But if not, you can push it out with Filewave. And you have also on the Windows side Perl, Python, bat files, and PowerShell.
Yeah, and you, without installing anything extra, you can do PowerShell and bat on Windows, and you can do Shell on Mac OS, and Python depends on if Python's present.
Although they keep changing the shells, so you got to be careful.
Well, when it runs Shell, you actually tell you in your script if it's ZSH or Bash, which you should use ZSH for a while.
That's another whole session of the Mac admins a couple of years ago, probably. So, audit history. This is a thing that like a lot of people don't know about. And this is only, I believe, in Central right now, but you can actually get, Filewave Central has an audit history menu item, and it keeps a log of all the administrative actions. So again, if it's only one person running the system, that's different. If you have a whole bunch of different administrators who are going to be in, this will actually say so-and-so created the file set, so-and-so assigned that file set. And,
but perhaps even if it's only you might be hearing reports of something, and then you want to think back to what changes happened and when, you know.
What did I do?
Yeah, and like, does it correlate with when these reports started? So it could be helpful for you.
And as with any management system, test it on a small group of machines before you go to the larger one. So I don't have to tell you why. So that's very handy as a log, but some organizations actually want that information, like from a requirements point of view. Again, if there's also able to get the log file. There's a get log file menu item that's also on the Filewave server, which shows you that I believe the Filewave server log. It can pull it back to you to see. And if you're using Client Monitor, this is kind of a related note, and this is changing a little bit in flux right now. If you're on the same network as with your admin as you are with your clients, and you want to do anything on the client, you can basically connect to the client using Client Monitor, and you can grab a log file. You can actually change the settings if you need to on the actual agent, all from that. We're working on ways to make that a little bit smoother when your server's in a different place from your
well, in Filewave Anywhere, you can see the activity stuff that you can see in Client Monitor that's in Central, but you can't pull logs yet. And in Filewave Central, we have this issue where it only really likes to talk if you can directly get to that client. So what we want to do is put the stuff that's in Filewave Anywhere that can see the status. wherever, put that in Central, and then we want to take the log pulling stuff from Central and put that in anywhere so that both would be consistent and have all that.
But when you call support, for instance, that's the first thing they usually ask you is for the
Pull the
Filewave
logs.
command.
So if we
Logs.
had this and could handle that, then it would help support cases go much faster.
True. Especially if you're hosted, because they can help
Yep.
you manage your server. I didn't actually know about this one until I started going through coming up, because I had 10, and then they're like, marketing's like, can you do 15? Because if I would, I'm like, okay, fine. So Josh and I had put, I didn't realize you can search, and there's a search for all file sets. There's an ability to just search for a particular file name in your entire, so if you've been doing Filewave for a long time, and you got a lot of stuff in there, you're like, I know I wrote that script in there, what the heck did I do? What you can do is you can actually search just on the name contains or whatever, and it will actually show you what file set it's in. And the whole thing is Filewave, you can picture it as like a big database, and all of the software you're pulling into it, minus App Store apps, obviously, and things like that, all of that stuff is like a big database, and you're basically assigning things to different places. Again, this is something I didn't know about. I forgot about it, or I don't know. It was just like I just forgot it was there. But it's it's very handy to do that. And this kind of shows like a quick search I did for the word Apple. But you can see it's listing the different file sets that found the word Apple as part of the title in. And there's a little button that says reveal in file set, which is actually nice. Maybe you have to very surgically go in and change one file. You could search for it and then reveal it. It'll go into the file set where you can actually make that change.
Mostly if I use scripts a lot in file sets and I use standardized naming so that I remember that I made a script that did a particular thing and I would have used a certain name, I could search across and find it. So it can be really easy to find stuff that you've done in the past that you're not sure if you documented. You could find it in the file set.
Now, when you get to our ages, we know we did it, but we just don't know where it was placed. So that is handy, especially if you have a larger, complex, setup going on. Mentioning this briefly, we do have Android and Chrome support. I'm just going to talk about it real quick. We have a full Android EMM solution, which is basically full MDM. It's actually very mature, and I think it has like almost all the functionality in there.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a huge amount of Android in the U.S., but
it's
worldwide,
not as
we are
popular in the U.S. In Asia Pacific, Android's big. We're not so big in Latin America, but I know from my prior company that in Latin America, Android was big, but yeah, we fully support it. It's popular in Asia.
But it works well, and I don't hear much about it, like in either way.
You don't really hear people complain about problems. It just works.
It just works, and the basic gist of what we can do is like Google Play. You can go to the Google Play Store, pull down the apps, assign them. Very similar to what you do.
And it has a profile concept,
and it has
too.
some profiles, and it has some pretty advanced permission stuff, too, which, to be honest, I need to dig more into, but I just wanted to mention that is something there if you have those in your environments. It counts as a mobile license, so if you're licensing mobile, i.e. iOS or Apple TV, it's the same licenses. No, we don't break it down by which of those you're using if you buy a mobile license. It should work with anything that doesn't identify as a tablet that's Android. And there's a website where they actually list all of the...
That does identify as a tablet, you mean?
Sorry,
Not a TV.
My bad, sorry. They have to identify as tablets. If they identify as an Android TV, then it won't work. We actually been doing Android for a while, actually, because we had an old one where you could actually push out APK. We had an older version of Android.
Google really went to this EMM model, which you can think of it like the automated device enrollment on the Apple side. They want it to be that you're not installing an APK on a device, but that you're enrolling it in the program. So that's what EMM is. And I think with Android 7 or so, maybe they really made that push.
I think we work with 8 and up. I got to double check.
It enrolls really easy.
The QR code usually too, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
There's like many ways to do it. So.
And then on the Chromebook side, you actually see your entire Google Admin Console, or GAC, the OU structure of your devices shows there. And if you move a device, it actually moves it on the Google side when you do a model update.
You can deprovision, you can move, you can create.
You can say it's disabled. So there's sort of a lost mode in Google land, and if you set it in Filewave, we set it in the Google side. And you might think, well, doesn't this duplicate the Google Admin Console? In some ways it does, but it gives you this sort of single pane of glass. So you don't want to have to jump into multiple places and do reporting in multiple places. This would expose the information so that you could just do the same sort of way for everything.
And by the way, it also gives you the tracking in some annotated fields.
You can see the tracking information, the location information, and those fields from the Google Admin Console, the annotated location, annotated. There's a bunch of annotated fields.
We gather all the inventory too as well. So you got all our inventory. And we also collect login usage. So a lot of schools more obviously with the Chromebooks, but the schools are liking the fact that they can get like what were the logins on this Chromebook, so they can figure out who had it last and things like that. It's an add-on. I would call it an add-on to the Google Admin Console.
If you have Chromebooks, it's an easy thing to set up because all you do for Chromebooks anyway is in GAC or it's not called GAC anymore. I don't think it's called like G Suite something, but you just set it to push out our extension, and there's a couple of settings on it, like how often it inventories, because you can choose that. And you can choose whether you want to expose location or not. And then it just shows up. It's very easy.
Yeah, and one piece, so depending on how people are licensing now, we're both engineers, but when people sometimes will do a site license with us and they'll just cover all their platforms, it's a nice add-on if it economically makes sense for the district or company to do them. I also like the fact, and we're going to mention in a minute, the TeamViewer integration is nice too, and inventory on both of these. So like again, this is all in your inventory, and then you can do things with. And we're actively working right now on adding more features to Chromebooks. Probably more to be.
We're doing research with customers to see what would have value. Like, what do they want? What's technically possible?
What can we get Google to let us do?
Yeah, because there are some additional APIs that we can do.
This is a quick snapshot of the Android and Chrome support. The upper left one is an example of the Google Play Store. The one on the right is some of the profiles that we talked about for, this is all Android, honestly. The other picture here is the Android and some of the profiles that we can manage. And they have a fairly complex and complete list of things how they work.
You can even prevent ability to screenshot on your Android device, because some places like that use devices they use a tablet for like a ticketing system or something. They don't want anyone to be able to take a picture of the screen.
Or my electrician or plumber came to the house, they have management of their
But there is a lot of restrictions and things you can do.
And the bottom one's a screenshot of just the location tracking on the Chromebooks, which some people just do it for that reason. But you can see basically we have device details, which is inventory, Chromebook data, which is those 4 fields. And then the users would show you that. And this is a position mapping. So when you're doing your position mapping, it's kind of in the same interface as it's kind of that one pane of glass, which we're going for. So the Android's a full EMM solution. And the Chrome is an add-on to the Google Admin Console. So what's a booster? Like, I know a couple of you guys had Filewave already. Those that have Filewave, hopefully you have boosters installed. But what is a booster and what's a super pref? Well, I think we made up both of those words, but they go back a long time. Filewave, as I mentioned, has been around for a very long time, about 30 years now. I used it, like I mentioned, on classic Mac OS. And a slightly different term, but the super pref is a very old one. So this is a good time to mention. We offer a hosted option for Filewave. Okay, and if you're interested in that, let us know. We can get you connected to the right people. Essentially, we host it in the cloud. It is the exact same thing that you would be running on premise. Okay, except the difference is that we are hosting it. So we will take care of your backups. We will coordinate with you on the upgrades. So we send a mailing out to all of our hosted customers and whatever round that they're going to be, and say, hey, we have our upgrade window at whatever, it's like 3 in the morning or whatever it is. We're getting ready to upgrade you. Here's what to expect. Here's the reasons why you want to do it, et cetera. And you do have the option in there of mailing us back and saying, whoa, I want to wait. Just like, can I wait a week or whatever? Or if there's a reason.
Maybe you have state testing going on and nothing can change, or there's something, you have some kind of blackout period at your company, and so we can push it off. You don't want to push it off indefinitely, but we can push it off like a couple of weeks or a month if needed, if there's like a business reason that you can't do it now, because we don't want to break you.
And we don't give you a hard time about it, but
yeah.
And then they'll remind you afterwards. But if that's to say you're going ahead with it, what'll happen is you'll get the mail after it's completing saying that we successfully moved you over, and there'll be a note generally coming, I think, from Josh or from the team saying, these are the following changes that we did, and
Operations now does those emails, so Tony Wheeler.
Cool. But a mail will go out. You will have like information about what to change, where to find the, what we fixed, what we changed. We also take care of your backups for you as well. So you don't have to have that headache of that. The only thing you lose is you won't have command line access to the server for obvious reasons, but most of the time you have that for upgrades. So, and if
And you
there's
can
anything
still
that
use.
if there's some reason that you need to have that access, like let's say they need to edit a file on the server, you can contact.
We do it through support because our cloud environment now is in Docker, and support can mount the container and make the changes to the files. So that's the process now. Certain things like the Grafana, there's YML files for Grafana that you have to put on the server to set up custom dashboards. That's a bottleneck or friction to go through support to have to do that every time. So we want things to be in the product so you can just do it and it would save it on the system.
So boosters cache Filewave content, and that's important if you're running Windows and Mac. I would still also run Apple caching servers if you're doing iPads, like an iOS. You definitely want to do that too. But these boosters they cache Filewave content. So anything that you're sending that's not coming from Apple, that's kind of coming from your Filewave server, these boosters will cache that content. And what that will do is like the first machine connects, we'll grab it through the booster, and then everyone else that's asking for that same big, huge file, they're going to pull it from the booster. So we've always encouraged people to use boosters, but when you go hosted, we would strongly, unless you're just running iOS, we would kind of really require.
We say it's a requirement. Not everybody has it, but we're working on that. But one of the reasons is for you because your server sits in AWS in some region, and so there's some amount of slowness to get stuff to you. A booster eliminates that. Also, there's bandwidth costs for us, obviously. If you have the booster, then it reduces that greatly, and the more we can reduce costs, the lower we can make the cost of Filewave. So it becomes a best practice for speed and for cost.
And efficiency too, because like why re-download a huge file
right.
1,000 times if you could.
If it's inside your network, it makes sense, a booster, and then the booster hands it off. Some people, their environments are entirely like, let's imagine kids at home or work from home. So you might say, well, the booster doesn't make sense for me because why am I pulling it down here just to pass it elsewhere? But that's where it comes in, that having that single point where it's going to that is not using our AWS bandwidth overall will help us keep our prices down as well as we can. So it helps everyone. That's
and it also, I guess, some behind-the-scenes stuff it does with messaging and how the clients communicate. So there are a lot of good reasons. It is
also, there is another benefit to the server is that if you have 2,000 machines that are hitting the Filewave server directly, they make it very busy. If you have 2,000 devices hitting a booster, the booster tunnels all that back to the server. It will handle batching whatever it has to batch. And so the server can be much happier and take...
It can be dealing with all the iPads, right?
So like there's a school I work with that has 40,000 Windows devices. You don't want 40,000 Windows devices hitting one Filewave server directly. That's very busy for the database. So the booster concept reduces load on the server. And so it's good in that way too.
And what a super pref is just like it ties in with the boosters. They can be used for more than that. But we talked about changing settings on the client. Like you can change the passwords. You can change different parameters for network, how fast they're pulling stuff down. But one of the things that you can do that's nice is you can create what's a super pref, which is a super preference for it's basically an overriding preference for the Filewave agent on both Mac and Windows, and you can say point it to that booster, or if you're a larger district, you could have it point to a bunch of different boosters, or you can have a list of 5 boosters and start with the fastest one, and if it fails, goes to the next one. So, and you also can cascade these servers. There's all fancy, people have done some fancy stuff, but the super pref lets you be able to change that without having to touch every machine. I've also had people who have wanted just to change their Filewave local agent password. You can push out a preference for that too. So super prefs are very powerful, but not. I would say a lot of people don't know about those. Hence the theme here. Oh, and they're free, right? They're free. So like.
Yeah. Once upon a time, we used to charge for boosters, which didn't make any sense at all.
I remember when I first
because
started.
it would discourage somebody from using them, and they only make sense to use.
And that's the thing with Filewave too, is like we are basically. When you license like a mobile license or whatever license, it's all of the components we offer on that platform. So it's like, you want a booster, take a booster, whatever.
Or an IVS for Windows imaging,
These are just quick examples. This is a booster monitor, so you can kind of see the status of what's going on, who's upstream from you, and then how many people are actually pulling stuff down from you. There is a SuperPref editor here. SuperPref editor here, where you can set settings about what Filewave server you're talking to, but also boosters, and then there's some additional optional settings for privacy.
It's things like not collecting location. In Europe, more it happens where we want to make sure not to collect what's called personal data. There's certain fields that just aren't collected. I think username might be one of them, but people set that. There's
and then the third one is like the list of the boosters. You can have up to 5, and they can have a whole fallback thing.
There's the tickle interval in the middle one that people might not know. Every 2 minutes by default, your
That's
clients,
what it's called. Yes, it's the tickle.
they talk to the server every 2 minutes saying, hey, do I have new stuff for me? And you can change that because maybe 2 minutes is too much, you know.
I had an example. There was a customer that was sending ships out, like people it was like some sort of education thing, but the ship goes out to sea, and they were somehow pushing stuff out with Filewave. Well, the tickle time basically says, what's your model number? Because we talk about model updates. That's how you can make your changes. It just asks a quick question, what's your number? And it says, my number is this, and then it backs away. But it does that every 2 minutes, and if there's a change, it pulls down what it needs. But this ship, they didn't want to have the tickle time at 2 minutes because it's like they're paying for their bandwidth. They're like, can we like tickle once an hour or whatever?
Yeah, that makes sense. And also just if you think about it, that means when you assign a file set, within 2 minutes, everybody that's online is going to know about it. And maybe that is a little too rapid for your taste, and so you can change that. And then the other thing is if you start to look at boosters, if you don't use them and you want to look at them, there's a checkbox on the rightmost screen, route server messages. Mm-hmm. You definitely want to make sure to check that box because that handles a bunch of the client to server communications. It makes it go through the booster instead. Without that checked, you're hitting the server for a lot of stuff from each client.
This is very important in a large environment, but as more people go to hosted now, this is becoming more of a relevant.
Well, it still is helpful because if you have a server with 10,000 devices, then you want boosters and you want to route messages through the boosters.
Honestly, everyone should be running boosters unless you have under 200 devices.
Yeah,
but even then, it still benefits because if I'm trying to update a bunch of stuff on the server, and I've got a bunch of downloads going on, that can slow me down. I want to be able to get my file set in there. I want to assign it. I want to get out. I want to update the model. And the server's doing all of its updating and it's signing certificates and all that. If it's also trying to get files to the clients, that's going to slow down.
Yeah, like if you have 200 clients and you're pushing out Adobe Creative Suite to 200 devices at once, then a booster would make sense.
So watching the time, so I'm going to speed up here, but because I want to do if you have time demoing at the end. But we have getting into the top 3 here now. Remote viewing on all platforms. So for years we had a VNC-based system where you could remote control the machines on Mac and on Windows. And a couple years ago we decided, okay, we want to do something other than VNC. And we also were getting requests for the other platforms. So we wanted to try to get a way to at least have some way to do the remote viewing, sometimes control on all the platforms. Android, macOS, and Chromebooks and iOS. So we searched around, we looked at a lot of options, and we settled on TeamViewer. And that way we can use their infrastructure to do it. But we've integrated it into the Filewave. So when you're in the Filewave client list, both on Anywhere and on Central, you can right-click on a client, or there's a button for, I think, the TeamViewer, where you can say, open up a remote session. Now, you can, depending how you set things up, it can be unattended or attended. That's depending both
I think
on the
you have the
platform and your
matrix.
settings. Yeah,
I think your screenshot
Matrix is on
has
the
it.
next slide, yep. But by doing TeamViewer, it's giving us a much more robust way to do that. And we're also getting the additional tools that TeamViewer does. Like, not that you might need to do this, but you can actually, they support interactive video and audio, recording, and again, it depends on the platforms and how they're supporting them. I saw remote printing, as well as switching the sides of who's presenting. So once you click on that, it actually begins to launch that. And we include two admin users who can,
so like if Bob and John run the Filewave server, then you're fine. They can make connections as many as they want whenever they want. But if Cindy is also there, well, you might need to buy that third one. And you have a choice. You don't have to use TeamViewer because if you like Bomgar, for instance, stick with Bomgar if you like it. But you do have the 2. And depending on your situation, if you only have 2 admins, then this would be sort of included anyway. And you might find that
sell additional if you need. So.
We can sell additional if you need. And if you like this better, then this is cross-platform. And this grid shows the OSs across the top and the types of things down the left side there. And
some of it's determined by what the platform can do. And obviously on the Apple side, you need to have the appropriate permissions. everyone knows what the TCC profile is, so you do have to make sure that like the screen sharing is.
In our KB, we have step-by-step, including the TCC profile is posted there, and we have TeamViewer host, which we would suggest that's the thing to push out to your fleet. Because it doesn't initiate connections out, it's just in. And then the full TeamViewer you would use on your admin machines to be able to tie into this and make the connection to
We are going through their infrastructure, which is nice because we don't have to worry about how that works.
Yes.
Yes. The kiosk. The kiosk is really, we came up with it a long time ago, but it's a, for the users to be able to pull down the apps themselves. So let's say a situation where you don't want the users necessarily to have admin rights, or maybe they do, but they don't know how to install software. The kiosk is basically a thing you can go to, and I'm gonna skip ahead to the picture a second, but you could basically go in there and you can say, I want to install this, 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 and this. It's like a self-servicing catalog. When we make an association, it can either be kiosk or it can be like happening behind the scenes with time or whatever, normal in the background. Everything that the kiosk does, it runs as the privileged user. So
system on Windows, root on Mac OS, the same as our agent. So you as an admin, say you want to publish BBEdit or whatever it is, and say that's for kiosk, the end user sees in the kiosk that they could pick to install BBEdit. It installs, it all works because Filewave is an administrator on both platforms. Kiosk works on also Android and iPads as well. So you can make VPP apps. So if you think about like, I don't know, I think about like special ed where there's certain apps that are assigned, but maybe not every app is on every device.
Or GarageBand where everyone owns it, but you don't want to put GarageBand on every device. That could be.
And so that portal lets the teacher pick to install whatever's appropriate for their classroom from the list of licensed stuff. And then if a paid app is in there, well, if you own 10 licenses and there's 30 iPads, if they only install it on the 10 that they pick, they're in control, and they don't have to navigate with you assigning it to the right 10. They can change it. They could remove it from one and then put it on another. It empowers them.
Yeah, but you're not dealing with Apple IDs, and that's the key thing. It's happening behind the scenes. I just want to mention too, we love the Filewave icon, but you can also customize the kiosk however you want. Now, you're getting a sneak peek here because it's not out yet, but this is what the kiosk looks like now. Pretty, straightforward. The first one's like how you pick apps. The second one is actually kind of where you can like
status. You can see what boosters.
And verify the model. Is it talking to the Filewave server?
And it's looked like this for a while.
Yeah, and that's the third one, which I believe is on an
iPhone.
Oh, okay, but we do have one on Android too. So we've decided to rework it to make it look a little more 2023. And this is an example of what the kiosk looks like on the
Mac OS.
And again, you'll be able to brand this, I believe, right? They'll be able to brand it with your with your logos or whatever. And you can see it looks a little more, I won't say iTunes-ish, but it looks prettier.
It's more modern
More
look.
modern look.
The theme doesn't look dated.
And we've also decided to revisit on the iOS as well. And you can see here, this just looks cleaner as well. You see the same type of updates, descriptions. It just has a nicer feel. And again, this can be branded as well. It's a different way of branding because it's an iOS app, but you could have your icon both for the kiosk and for the. That if you don't have the kiosk app or the app portal on there, they would have it would be a web clip.
There's a web clip, but actually with this new, when we finally cut over to this, because over the next couple of releases we're going to step into this, where, as I understand it, iPad and iPhone come first, and then Mac OS after that, and then Windows after that. There will be ways to customize it, and the web clip method will go away. It will be entirely app.
And this is like my last topic, and we can do a quick demo at the end. And questions. Inventory, as we've kind of mentioned through here, this is actually, I think, underutilized, I would say, to be honest. We get inventory everywhere. Years ago, Filewave was actually two products. It was a asset trustee, and we had a very aquatic theme, and we had the Filewave itself. And one, it was a starfish, the other was a clamshell with a pearl in it. Yeah, with network connections on the bottom. And they unified that into one product. And what's nice is that really let us use the inventory information throughout Filewave. Yes, it's used for smart groups, but you can do a lot with reporting. On Mac and Windows, we gather more than just so you get from your system profile or whatever. We can actually say what applications are on the machine, when have they launched, where are they located, how often did they launch, what's their total launch time, when was their first launch time, and we gather all that data, and that's all available in inventory. As we mentioned earlier, any custom fields that we have, whether they're generated by scripts or imported, those are also in inventory. You can use any value or field can be used. For instance, this is kind of related, is that if you're doing the customized iOS image backgrounds now, you can use any variable in inventory to be able to actually do the background.
So on iPads and iPhones, you can send a wallpaper to all your devices and then have like the serial number of the device show. So like, for instance, if I have a stack of iPads, it can be a real pain to find the serial number for each one. You can send the lock screen so that it has the serial number, and then you can just wake it up and read the serial number right off the screen in nice big text if you want.
Yep. And any of this data is available to the API. So like, let's say you're sharing with a ticketing system, as you mentioned.
Incident IQ.
Incident IQ. You could have all the data from here. It feeds into your help desk ticketing system. It's getting updated. They have what they need. And again, these inventory fields, you can generate their smart groups. And we have a reporting module, which is basically looks identical to how do you do the smart groups. And now I believe you can actually take a report and turn it into a smart group, or turn a smart group into a report. So the two kind of overlap, which is nice. And these are just the screenshots of the inventory. Again, it's anywhere it's available. I highlighted custom fields because I wanted you to see that that these can show up in inventory. And you basically come down to criteria, like what am I trying to match, and then what fields do I actually want to actually show in that result. These can generate reports that I believe you can even schedule to get mailed.
You can schedule to email them, yep.
But the queries also tie into the API if you're using, we have another part of the API where you can actually have reports that are getting queried.
Yes, there's two APIs, the command line API, which is version 1, and then the web admin or anywhere API that has all the new stuff.
So that is basically what I wanted to talk about here. I'm happy to do a demo, but I want to ask if there's any questions that anyone has. And
there was a lot there, yeah.
There's a lot. We covered a lot, so hopefully people learn new things. Or any questions? I really want to throw the catch box. No one? Oh, come on. Okay, well, I'll put these links up here. If you're interested in these slides, will be available too. We have some links. We have a lot of things, the Filewave knowledge base, which
that one goes to the new one that is technically launching next Friday, but you can get there now. And it has some chat GPT magic on it, so you can ask it anything about Filewave, and it will give you the answer plus a link to the KB article.
We got all of our
done a
social
lot of
links
work
in the
to
second one here.
test it. Yep. So on YouTube, we post a lot of videos, especially from training things we do on Discord. The last one's Discord. The get a free demos. If you're not a customer, you could go to that QR code if you wanted a demo. But the Connect on Social has more. It has our Twitter, our Instagram. It has all the usual stuff.
And then I have this last slide, which you put
which is us.
I want you to say, if you have any questions, you can connect with us at any time.
Yeah.
And
so yeah, that'll give you our email if you want to reach out to either one of us, or we're pretty easy to find at Filewave.
So, and you want to see a demo? There's 3 minutes. I'll figure it. I'll just do it very quick until the camera cuts off. Okay. So we have. I just want to show you Filewave Anywhere, which is. Where is it here? Kane.filewave.net. Okay. Make this nice full screen so you can see it. So. This is the interface. Again, anyone who has a server can do this now. I'm going to go with a local login, but we do support the
Azure and Okta and Google
right?
for IDPs.
And this is available. We did add a bunch of stuff in Filewave 15, which is nice too.
Like support of Windows imaging, which is less important.
I really want to show you the dashboard because it's harder to show what that looks like. But the web interface is pretty straightforward. I have some boring ones. Josh probably has some more.
If you click on Filewave System, you can see the built-in ones. Those are about.
Which one's under Filewave? Yeah.
Go to Filewave. Those are the built-in ones that tell you like.
That's an exciting one. Oh, boosters is always pretty. So.
Well, but only if you have boosters doing stuff.
I do have one.
Yeah, main booster.
Yeah, you can see I have one, but because my server is hosted in the same cloud as the customers, and I would not try to run without a booster because that'd be not a good idea. But You got a whole bunch of, let's see what else we have
I
here.
mean, the other nice thing about Grafana is if you make some custom dashboards, it has a slideshow view. So imagine if you have a big monitor in a central place, you could actually have it cycling through a few displays of things that you want to always keep an eye on, like how busy is the CPU on the server getting maxed out or something. So you can use it for monitoring how software deployments are going, how
You can tell me
busy
what
the
it's
server is. What was that?
The blank associations.
Oh, yeah, because you have to pick, in Central, you have to pick to expose them to dashboard.
No, they are, but it's
Oh.
something that I had. Yeah, so.
Oh.
But you can see alerts of things that I might need to know about. I mean, it's mine's a very basic one. Josh probably has much more prettier ones. Maybe the Grafana dashboard.
Some of them are
Here's a Grafana dashboard. It's pretty.
some of them are helpful for you to know, but we have some of these in here if you have a support case and they're like, well, we think NATS is sick, so we can look at the NATS dashboard and see what it's doing.
Here's your Apache server status. So.
Mm-hmm.
There's some good stuff in here. I am probably not the one to demo the Grafana, but people have extended them.
There's a good video on YouTube on getting started with Grafana.
And the music is blew me off.
Good.
Thank you. I really want to hold this.